Hi, I'm Debbie Close, and I'm here to show you how to make a quilt. With winter coming on fast, I am ready to dig into my stash of fabric and all my patterns and look for that next project that will keep me busy over the next months. There is nothing better to have on your bed than a handmade quilt. And of all the quilts that I have made, I have kept none for myself. I have given them all away as gifts. But one day I hope to finish that one quilt for myself. I have been quilting for about 15 years and have completed about a dozen quilts. Making a quilt is a very relaxing hobby for me, and I find it very enjoyable. But the joy I see on the faces of the people on the receiving end makes it all worth the effort that I put into making it. It is a very slow process, but very rewarding. I'm going to show you some of the shortcuts that I have learned over the years and hope that it makes it a little easier for you to learn how to quilt. The first thing that you need to do is prepare your fabric. So it's not always going to be in small pieces, but you're going to wash your fabric, and you wash just your fabric by itself, and no fabric softener. And then when it's dry, you're going to iron the pieces and to remove all of the wrinkles. The next thing that we're going to do is cut the fabric. And what I'm going to show you how to do is a very simple pattern called a 9 patch. And all it is 9 squares making a block, and each square is 2 inches. So we're going to cut some 2-inch blocks. And what I'm doing here is I have piggybacked my fabric so that I can cut 2 pieces at the same time rather than cutting them individually. So I make a strip, a 2-inch strip, and then I'm going to take that strip and I'm going to cut it into more 2-inch squares. Sorry, my dog's in here and he's making a funny little noises. It's helpful to have a rotary mat because it's easier to cut on. And then this is a rotary cutter that I have one that's ergonomic, so it's easy to handle, and an acrylic ruler. The mat comes already lined so you can see where your inch markers are, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever you need. Okay, and so one of the other tricks that I have learned is when I am cutting my squares to make a quilt, I use Ziploc baggies for all the different sizes that I might need for a quilt. So like this is 2-inch squares, and that way then when I get ready to put the blocks together, I just have my little baggies out. I'm not going to do that for this one because it's a relatively simple quilt. One of the other little secrets that I have learned over the years is you want to line up your squares and you do a 1/4 inch seam. But when I go to sew, instead of just sewing one block at a time, I kind of do a running stitch. So I sew the one block, and then I pick up 2 more pieces of fabric and, leave a little bit of space, do a couple of blind stitches, and then sew the next 2 pieces. And so on until you have 3 groups. And I do not do any back stitching at the end because you're going to sew all the blocks together, and I've not ever had a seam come apart. The next step is we're going to press our little pieces, and you want to iron towards the dark side, the darker fabric. That way the seam doesn't show through quite as much. Okay, so that's how we make a block. And I have put together 2 here, and so this is a finished 9 patch. So we have 9 little blocks, and I have made 2, and that's what we're going to do, is then you would sew them together to make a row, and then several rows make a quilt. An example would be one that I have laying over here, and you can see all the squares that have been sewn together. This is a quilt top that is ready to be quilted, and that is kind of the next step. Once you've got your quilt top all finished, is you would find you a nice flat surface. I have an old dining room table here in my sewing room, and that's what I use. And so you would put your quilt top down first, the right side down, and then you would have batting. And I use batting that's called Warm and Natural. It's 100% cotton, and it's very, very warm. And then you would put your batting down. And then on top of your batting, with the right side facing up, would be your backing. And I always use flannel, because then my quilts are really nice and warm. And so then you're going to have that all laid out, smooth it out so there's no wrinkles, and then you're going to pin it. And I have this lovely little can that my son made for me in kindergarten, and I have kept it all these years, and I just have it full of safety pins. And that's what I use to pin my quilt. And you want to start from the center and work out, smoothing as you go, so that you don't have any wrinkles. And then you always want to flip it over to make sure there's no wrinkles on the other side. There's lots of books with patterns. I even have a book that's called the Encyclopedia of Designs for Quilting. And inside there are just tons of designs that you can do for quilting. I happen to have right over here a quilt that I am currently working on. And as I stated, this is one that I hope to put on my bed when it's finished. And I have used a couple of different techniques on this as far as the quilting. Straight lines for like the rooftops. A typical quilting pattern is called in the ditch, and that's where you just go right along the inside seam, and you don't want to do your stitches real tight, but you want it tight enough that it looks kind of puffy. But that's kind of what I wanted to show you how, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and happy quilting.